Hey everyone. Last time had a lot of revelations. Some were easy puzzle solves, while others, well, not so much. I saw several outlandish guesses about last episode's mysteries that several have attached to themselves to no matter what, it seems. So I'll try to be even more clear with future puzzles so that the theories aren't so out there next time. But what even happened last time to facilitate these theories? Well, it was all about Neji. Hinata got her transplant, and we'll talk about this more when her episode comes up. Neji was assigned a task of questionable morality to retrieve information from Hinata for Minato. And that flashback! I ripped through the remainder, covering his training with a old hero of past wars from a questionable nation. I placed his shack in the land of waterfalls, and people assumed that he's from the land of waterfalls. I had to pick a country that Neji had to pass through. So, there's only one of three. And he also uncovered an odd stone with a peculiar message. If you didn't get anything out of that message, hopefully it'll make sense sooner or later. And we ended with an excitable Kiba darting around the corner and practically falling into Neji in his panic. All of the Konoha 12 had at least minor changes to their personalities during the time skip. And we'll see more and more as we get more intimate time with them. A nice thing about this time skip arc is that I get to spend a lot of time with their renewed relations between each other. More than at any other time, we'll get to see a more organic development of how the Konoha 12 regard each other. Because pre-time skip, they were assembled into teams that were then shattered and reassembled differently. And now, with Kurenai and Asuma out of the picture, you can bet there'll be another rework to their teams. Just like with the juggling of all these eyes, I know that the team reworks can feel a little bit like a cop-out. But I tried to implement it as naturally as I could, not to mention with the intention for these reworks to further build their teamwork between each other. On one hand, if they're professional enough, they should work well with anyone. But on the other, they're still kids, and they've all of them spent the last 4 years working alone. Not a single experience in life goes by without impacting you at least a little bit. 4 years, for someone from the age of 12 to 16, is literally like 30% of their life. It's a big deal. I've said so in the past already, but I am trying very much to appeal to the realism of 12-year-olds forced out onto the battlefield or out alone in the middle of nowhere. Tastes change too. People you don't like when you're younger, you grow to like as you grow older, and vice versa. Unless I'm a special case. I certainly had friends in grade 6 that I no longer even associated with in grade 10. And then there were other kids that I thought were weird in grade 6 that I befriended and remain friends with to this day. These are all the sorts of things I try to keep in consideration when I look at the Konoha 12. I don't necessarily want them to hate each other, but something along that vein would certainly be helpful in building their character. But they're not 12 anymore, and they've all been forced to grow up. We can talk about the other Genin and Chunin in Konoha all day long, but my rewrite is on the Konoha 12. They're the stars of this show. Also, the heat is still very much in full swing. As of making this script, British Columbia, the province west of me along the western coast, is burning, and all of its smoke is blotting out the sun where I live. Add to that the 36 degrees Celsius temperatures, or 97 Fahrenheit. It's also 73% humidity right now, which is absurd, since my neck of the woods is pretty dry all year round. So it's hot, it's muggy, And the smoke makes it hard to breathe. It hurts your eyes. It's not good all around. I keep getting weather warnings and like air quality warnings. It's great. Right now, it's great. However, there's a relief in the weather coming later this week that'll hopefully encourage the temperature as a whole to take a chill pill. And before we hop into today's episode, I need to request the same old. Please comment any thoughts, and I'll engage with any questions without spoiling anything. Of course, like and share to get the word of my channel out to others. I'm still considerably small. I have modest goals, and I think 10,000 subs isn't an unreal ask. I love that I have this small set of faithful subscribers that return with every video, but at the end of the day, we need to aim always higher. So please, if you've somehow made it 71 episodes in and not clicked that subscribe button, what's the harm? Finally, and this is something I never mentioned because I quite frankly forget about it all the time, please hit the bell icon. The idea that you subscribe to a channel and still don't get updates from them is an insane idea to me, so maybe that's why I never remind about the bell icon. But it really does help you catch my episodes in a timely manner. I get so many comments about people who somehow missed the release time. Well, the bell icon fixes that. I'm planning other content in the future to supplement the channel and diversify it a little more, so hopefully that'll pull in a greater audience as well. But that other stuff is a big project. I'm talking huge, that will take a lot of time to plan ahead, and with my limited time, I can't exactly dedicate a lot to it yet. So it's soon, trademarked. With all that out of the way, let's get into the episode. Day 1. In the few weeks after Kiba arrived at the village, he spent a lot of his time in the woods on the outskirts. He didn't realize just how busy and populated Konoha was. It was all just a little bit overwhelming, so he stayed to the woods with Akamaru. Though, in stark opposition to his own feelings, Akamaru was super excited to be reunited with his fellow Inuzuka pups. Now that he'd finished growing, he wouldn't so easily get tossed about by the other dogs while playing. But at the end of the day, Akamaru still preferred solace if it meant spending that time with his favorite human. Kiba, meanwhile, had grown so used to talking to animals that didn't even answer back that it was jarring walking around town. He'd already been called out for thinking aloud several times, and was even batted a couple times for blatantly ogling a bunch of different girls. He couldn't help it. They were the first humans he'd seen in years. What did they expect? A few times he would return to town, it would just be to eat with friends. Today, he was sitting beside and opposite Ino, Naruto, Sakura, and Shikamaru. Shikamaru was eating slowly while taking in the collective adventures of the other three. Kiba didn't take point in the conversation himself. As part of his attempt to acclimatize to people, he wanted to first just be around people he liked. Talking would come later. You find a way back to the land of sound? Shikamaru nearly choked on his food, surprised that any of them would want to go straight back to the trouble. Well, I didn't, Ino interjected. Her interruption was at the benefit of the others, since she had already told Shikamaru and Choji her entire story. Kiba was also not splurging on the story. He didn't know where he had even been up until he started heading back to Konoha, because none of the animal tribes had any use for a proper map. Shaking his head with a small smile about the animals, Kiba returned his focus to the conversation. Obviously you know why I went back, but I also needed to confirm for myself whether Ino had been taken prisoner, Sakura explains. I was just passing through, Naruto explains in a dead tone. They got in my way, so skulls had to be cracked. Raising an eyebrow at Naruto, Kiba chuckles again despite himself, blown away by the violence Naruto probably enacted. Or was it just that beastie inside of you? Ino asks, smiling at Naruto and leaning over to elbow him in the side. Wincing at her elbowing, Naruto's cold stare turns soft as he suddenly playfully retreats and softly laughs at her jabs. Unable to help himself, Kiba snickers again. Only Ino could make fun of the nine-tailed fox inside of Naruto and get away with it. Her boldness knew no bounds. She didn't even hesitate before jabbing him. Naruto arrived back last, so Kiba knew Ino didn't have some sort of inner circle friendship with him, but she still didn't hesitate to jab at him. Squinting, he wondered if that was due to some sort of connection between Jinchuriki. Knowing Kiba's newfound social awkwardness, the others did not try encouraging him to take part, and let him sit quietly to listen. After they finished their meals, Kiba once again noticed Ino and Naruto's plates were so bare they were practically clean again, while Sakura and Shikamaru still had leftovers. Scooping what was left into a bag, Kiba carried it out with him for Akamaru, who sat beside him in the restaurant, but he felt too awkward feeding him from the table. Once outside, Shikamaru tells him that he still has a D-rank mission to bang out with his genin, so he departs alone. Naruto's turned stone silent, his head tilting back as he looks toward the Kage heads. Ino and Sakura continue to giggle between each other as they wave goodbye to Kiba and Naruto and continue about their day. Kiba watches them go, bedazzled by Ino and her clear confidence that she didn't have before. Shaking his head free from the clouds long after the girls had left, Kiba looks nervously at Naruto, hopeful that he wasn't caught daydreaming. But Naruto had paid him no mind at all. He muttered a sound that could have been a bye before walking away in a different direction yet from Shikamaru and the girls. Dropping to a knee, Kiba tears open his bag of food and feeds it to Akamaru. They spent so much time running around the wilds of the world that both had become accustomed to extremely long walks. So, as Akamaru finished the food, which only took seconds, Kiba nodded his head for Akamaru to follow him for a walk, and both sprinted back to the edge of town. While Sakura and Ino wonder what they'll do next, Sakura receives a summons from Lady Tsunade to visit her at the hospital. Apologizing to Ino, Sakura reassures her that they'll catch up later as she leaves. Leaping to the nearest rooftop, Sakura darted toward the hospital, which was rather close by. After arriving, Sakura wandered the halls looking for Tsunade before coming to a private room with a single window to look in. Glancing through the glass, Sakura saw a large man with a mane of white hair, lying in the lone bed by the window. Frowning, she looked up and down the hall before cracking the door open and going in. She had heard the rumors since returning, but to see the proof was jarring. In a comatose state over the last 4 years, Jiraiya had lost much of his muscle mass. When she came to his side, she carefully looked at his face and noticed that beneath his eyelids, his eyes shot back and forth rapidly. Putting a hand on his forehead, Sakura teared up a little bit that one of the great Sannin had been knocked so low. "Wrong room," Tsunade said from the door, evading talking about Jiraiya and nodding for Sakura to follow her out. Apologizing for letting her curiosity get the better of her, Sakura promises that she won't go in there again. "No," Tsunade answers, her voice strained even in the one word. "Please do. Jiraiya never gets visitors anymore, and more than myself or Orochimaru, he deserves them." "Not even..." Sakura starts, wondering about Lord Hokage before she enters another room with Tsunade to see Choji and Shino standing there as well. They greet each other quietly, and Sakura realizes that the only one missing from their team now is Kurenai-sensei. "You three were going to learn sooner or later, so it's better that it's in a controlled circumstance," Tsunade explains, shutting the door behind her so that their conversation could be private. During the war on Iwa, Kurenai was critically injured and passed away before Asuma could get her to the appropriate help. Furrowing her brow, Sakura looked down at the floor. She knew that Kurenai was fatally injured the last time she saw her, but perhaps she was in denial as to whether Kurenai survived. Knowing the truth at long last gave her an odd amount of closure, instantly. Sighing, Sakura looks up at her former teammates and sees them both in a similar state to her own. She expected Choji to be weeping, but his eyes were dry. "She died trying to save us," Sakura said, providing additional context for Choji, who was clearly taken long before this. "The war spread us out, and several of us were held prisoner. She and Asuma helped to provide distractions so that Ino and Naruto could weaponize their beasts." "Shino told me," Choji answered. As hard as his face was, at least his voice was laced with emotion. Biting her lip, Sakura returned her attention to Tsunade. "What happens to us now?" "U11 will be retested," Tsunade told her. "You missed several tuning exams in your absence, so we are preparing a small test to determine your ability. Once we've re-evaluated you, we'll figure out how the teams look afterward." In these same moments, Tenten's found Hinata with Neji at her heels. She's been unable to find Naruto all day, in these moments wondering where Asuma-sensei is, and who would give them an answer to that question. Hinata had obviously been busy with her own stuff since returning, but upon their sensei's mention began wondering herself why she hadn't seen him yet. He never stopped by the hospital to see her. Perhaps a long mission, or perhaps traveling somewhere. Or, Hinata swallows at the idea, maybe he fell during the war. With so few Jonin left, the village was stretched thin for missions at all times. The Konoha 12 knew of these losses, but it was difficult to imagine their own teachers being taken out as well. Most of them went to Shikamaru for answers about what happened while they were gone. He was open to most of the questions, but for some he went out of his way to avoid answering. It was pretty ominous, but the general positivity of their uniting tended to distract them from whatever deeper meaning lay in Shikamaru's refusal to answer certain questions. They started being referred to as the Triumphant 12, for nearly all of them vanished during a war, and all of them returned healthy. Whether they wanted it or not, people were stopping to look at them or point when they passed by on the street. All of them accidentally gained a level of fame simply for returning to the village. Unfortunately, Naruto was still being treated the same way as always. But he seemed entirely infallible to their words now, almost as if he was constantly distracted by an invisible force. And unlike Tenten and now Hinata, he didn't seem to care a whit for finding his teacher anymore. In fact, for all of them, even the trackers, Naruto became nearly impossible to find in the village. Even when they tracked him, he seemed to catch on, and kept a conscious distance from them. The only people he let near him were Ino, Sakura, and Sasuke. It hurt Hinata a little bit, but knowing what she'd been through in her time away, she figured he'd been through a lot and needed time to process. And Sasuke himself was distracted with picking up the pieces of his clan. The only other survivor of the clan was now gone from the village, presumably never to return. He had just been saddled with both terrible news and enormous responsibility. He seemed to take it in stride, but Hinata wondered if his offer for the eye was fueled by the rest of his world shattering around him. From what she had heard, his surgery for his own eyes had complications, and she wondered if that had anything to do with how he acted now. Shino had returned to his family to share his stories and experience, which led to several of his extended family to go out on an Aburame-led pilgrimage with his father at its head. Similar to Sasuke, Shino now stood as the only combat-ready Aburame in the village. As Kiba made his way around the village outskirts, he inevitably came to the hiking portion where he had to climb up to the top of the Kage heads. Though there were a few buildings up here, it was mostly deserted and quite peaceful every time he passed by. This time, he saw Naruto looking down at the village from the top of the cliff. This was his third time around the village outskirts, and Naruto wasn't here the first 2 times. Add to that, it was nearly dusk, and he assumed most would be heading home around this time. Distracted from the run, Kiba approached him and followed his gaze into the village. Naruto appeared to be looking toward a corner of the village, near where the jails were. "What you looking at, Naruto?" Kiba asked curiously. Talking one-on-one was not a challenge for him as talking in a crowd was. But Naruto didn't respond in any way. His eyes remained fixated on something in particular. Standing this close to Naruto, Kiba notices something odd about his scent. It's very similar to Ino's. Neither of them had this peculiar scent before they were separated from the village. Were the tailed beasts fundamentally shifting these softer aspects of their identity? "Go away, Kiba," Naruto answered at last in a quiet, flat voice. He didn't sound annoyed or angry, but like Kiba, maybe he just wanted to be alone. Without a word of protest, Kiba nodded and returned to his jog. He wondered how many of the Konoha, or Triumphant 12, had negative development from their time away. Panting, Kiba slowed to a walk, glad that he wore just a small fur so the wind could dry his bare skin. Akamaru looked ready for 3 more laps yet, but night had finally fallen, and Kiba thought it was probably wise to turn in. It was his dogma to always be capable of doing just as much as Akamaru, but not at the cost of bed rest. His body always needed to be in peak condition for the coming war that would undoubtedly rage. Shaking his head to stave off the sullen attitude, Kiba sighed deeply as he turned back towards town and smelled Ino nearby. Blushing in the building darkness, Kiba swore that if he started smelling phantom scents of her, then he was really getting obsessed. It only took a few more whiffs to confirm absolutely that she was somewhere nearby. But Kiba was in the middle of nowhere in terms of Konoha's layout. Why would she be out here? Casually walking through the woods toward her scent, Kiba eventually came across a rather large but clearly abandoned barn. The structure was weathered and worn. Its once vibrant green paint had now faded to a soft, dusty hue, with several patches peeled away. There were signs of sagging on the roof, and its walls had several holes through them. But the doors were still on their hinges, and the grass wasn't very overgrown around the barn's edges. Kiba slowed down a touch as he saw the building, but the closer he got, the stronger her scent became. Cautious now that maybe she was doing something crazy like containing her beast inside, Kiba lurched to a stop and began creeping as best he could nearer. He left Akamaru behind to keep watch for him as he hugged up against a wall of the barn, near one of its few windows. When he peeked inside, all he could see was the pitch black of its innards. Squinting and grinding his teeth, Kiba ducked his face down again and pressed his ear against the wall. "Never know," someone spoke in a muffle. Biting his thumb, Kiba performed a quick summoning jutsu and conjured a little cat beside him. Just being near the cat magnified his own hearing. While the 3 primary animal clans were very powerful in a combat setting, the remaining lesser tribes had very useful tricks of their own. The contract with the cats wasn't to summon them to assist necessarily in combat, though some of them were certainly capable of it. Their contract was meant to enhance the summoner's hearing, by linking him intrinsically with the summoned cat. This link ended whenever the summon ended. Of course, these cats could also offer scouting of their own as well. With his hearing enhanced, Kiba grinned as the muffled, quiet voices became clear as day, though their volume still fluctuates wildly. "Take down the Hokage," Kiba heard Naruto saying, the tail end of whatever horrors he had been ignorant to. "That's why," Ino whispered in response, though their volume dropped so low that even Kiba's enhanced hearing missed the middle of the sentence. "Against 2 Jinchuriki?" Face scrunching in confusion, Kiba closed his eyes to focus on their voices as much as possible. "Enough's enough," Sasuke said, seemingly in agreement with the others talking. "Let me sink my teeth into something. We absolutely must win." Hinata's kind voice was clear here, and Kiba couldn't believe his ears. The Hyuga were known as protectors of the village and its Hokage. He just couldn't see a situation where she would willfully turn on the Hokage unless she wanted to throw away her entire legacy. Plot is going to be... The last voice was difficult to discern, but after deductive reasoning combined with the tone, it had to be Sakura. Before the end. Akamaru started barking suddenly, and Kiba realized he had been focusing so much on eavesdropping that he stopped smelling. Tenten was right beside Akamaru. But why was she here too? Freaking out, Kiba bid his summoned cat to return to whence it came as he sprinted through the forest to evade being caught, stopping midway in worry for Akamaru. But they wouldn't hurt Akamaru. They would hurt Kiba though, based on that conversation. Pulling a dog whistle from his pocket, Kiba whistled a pattern into it so that Akamaru would know to run and circle back to him later. For now, he would lay low until he could escape to the village and tell someone. Kiba walked amongst wolves and wild dogs. These were not like the ninja dogs Kiba grew up knowing. They were a more vicious sort. It had taken him months of looking to find their little sanctuary in the foothills. If he wasn't walking past little caves, it was amongst tiered rocky outcrops that the wolves all around perched themselves atop. As Kiba navigated between these outcrops, several of the dogs growled or snapped at him, but after his escapades with the bears, this wasn't enough to make him flinch. Other wild dogs were hidden behind boulders that Kiba had to circumnavigate, and the boulders themselves varied in size, some smaller ones barely peeking above the ground cover, to larger ones that command attention with their sheer bulk. Gentle slopes led up to these rocky outcrops. The terrain was a blend of greenery and exposed rock, where patches of wild flowers and shrubs dot the spaces between the boulders. For Kiba, the atmosphere was rugged but inviting, drawing him to explore as much as he could while he was here. And as he delved deeper into their little sanctuary, more and more dogs showed themselves around or above him. This gathering crowd of dogs then started to follow him through their habitat. Most of them growled at him or bared vicious teeth as ominously as they could. It had been a while since he spent time with anything other than a dog, but he thought that maybe the scent of the bears was still on him. He thought Akamaru might calm some of them down, but just as Kiba was seeing, Akamaru was an outsider to their pack, and they did not care for his presence either. But as per Kiba's demeanor here, Akamaru wasn't growling or snapping back at the dogs, maintaining the same calm as his master. Akamaru had recently gone through a growth spurt, but he was still much smaller than these wild dogs. Climbing up a couple of the tiered outcroppings, Kiba saw his goal and walked towards it unabashedly. He had reached the king canine, who stood so tall that Kiba wondered if he was anything at all to the great beast. But it looked down at him all the same and measured him quietly. Its body was muscular and sinewy, exuding raw strength and power. Its head set atop what appeared to be pure muscle, too strong to be real. Its fur was thick and bristling, doubtlessly providing protection against any of the elements and adding to its imposing presence. The king's large and clawed paws stepped toward Kiba for a moment, surely capable of tearing through steel. Despite its fearful appearance, there is a primal intelligence in its gaze, aware of the dominion it held over all the wolves and dogs in the world. "Don't think you've gone unnoticed," the great dog tells Kiba. "We've heard of your intent already, to sign with those wretched cats." "Forget the cats. Haven't you heard what I've already done?" Kiba asks with a cheeky raised eyebrow and a small smirk. "You're breaking all the rules," the king tells him dismissively. "But a contract with the cats is where I draw the line." "I'll get your contract one way or another," Kiba answers him, remembering the bears again. He did everything they asked him to, such as hand-to-hand brawling with them, and they still gave him greater challenges afterward. Or the birds and their insane logic and unbalanced priorities. They were easier and faster to convince than the bears, who even kicked him out of their settlement at 3 different points. This king of the wolves wasn't going to dissuade him simply by saying no. The bears and the eagles came around. Don't go thinking I'll stop now. Kiba laughs, patting Akamaru on the head. My bond with dogs is greater than any other animal. Akamaru here is my lifelong companion. If you can survive 3 days amongst my children, I will grant you another audience, the king tells Kiba. Great! But I will still say no, the king continues, talking over Kiba. And then I will send you on a pilgrimage to meet Lady Katsuyu, who protects all the lesser animal clans. You will ask her for her blessing to sign with me. If you survive that journey and return to me, I'll still say no. And then I will send you to meet with each of the 5 great Kage, so that they might size you up and consider you worthy of the wolves. And when you return to me, I'll still say no. The king tells Kiba, baring his own teeth, implying that there's nothing in this world that would convince him to sign any contract with Kiba. I signed with the turtles, and trust me, they're even more stubborn than you. Kiba laughs again, taking the declinations and roaring a challenge straight back at the great beast. I'm done with you, the king tells him. Take your 3 days with my children and hope that they let you sleep. Just as the king promised, Kiba stayed in their encampment for 3 days. Some of the wolves challenged him and he defended himself with just his hands and zero jutsu to impress them as much as he could. They simply did not share the same physical strength of the bears, so his fighting with them felt considerably easier. But they were pack animals and instinctively attacked him as a group. That was harder. The birds and the turtles were so much more peaceful than these predator animals. He expected the eagles to be like this, but they were more interested in strange treasures and riddles. In a way, they were more challenging to impress than the bears. Kiba did not like puzzles. Or when the turtles challenged him to break their shells, and he couldn't figure out if they were being literal, since that would have killed them. Looking at it one way, the bears and the wolves were so much more straightforward and easier to comprehend. Kiba could handle stubborn and violent. After just 2 days of an insane gauntlet with constantly attacking wolves, Kiba was finally granted reprieve. Laying in the dirt, covered in cuts and bite marks, Kiba winced as Akamaru licked his wounds. Pretty soon, buddy, he muttered, forcing out a laugh. Pretty soon our pack's gonna be huge. Woken by a wolf's teeth on his bicep, Kiba leaps to his feet and pries the dog off of him. Growling at the underhanded attack while he was sleeping, Kiba instinctively reaches for a kunai that he doesn't have. He almost considers weaving a jutsu, but in the time that he remembers where he is, he also realizes that he simply must endure this kind of thing. Thanks to his chakra and training, he had explosive energy and lightning-quick reflexes to deflect the wolves' attacks before they got close to landing. It was only by his own failure to defend that Kiba was ever injured in the first place. He needed to somehow learn to protect himself even while sleeping. Maybe he and Akamaru needed to sleep in shifts. At the end of the 3rd day, he returned to the king, covered in wounds, but just as vibrant as when he first arrived. As long as you wish to sign with the cats, no, the king told him. I'm surprised. If you're a dog person, why not just turn your back on the cats? I'd be lying through my teeth if I told you I'd given up on anything, Kiba tells him, pointing up at his heads. Have I at least impressed one of you, King Cerberus? All 3 heads of the great king rounded onto Kiba, and all 3 looked annoyed with the suggestion that they wouldn't think in tandem with each other. Go find Lady Katsuyu then, the the king answered, chuckling in its growling voice at the possibly insane challenge. Because you want me to stop beating up your children? Kiba asks, testing his boundaries with the great dog. If the Cerberus decided to attack him, Kiba was pretty sure that would be the last anyone ever saw of him. Such a powerful beast was, as yet, beyond him. Blinking at Kiba, the king turned his back on him and returned to his hilltop bed. Kiba didn't even know the first place to look for Katsuyu. His only hints was that all the animal clans he'd met so far referenced her in some way, and that she offered them all her protection. That implied that she was nearby to them all. Apparently, the snakes were far meaner than all the other animal clans and would actively hunt them if they came near. And the toads were so secretive about their location that even the other animal clans had no idea where they resided. Lady Katsuyu didn't govern any of them, she simply protected them from external threats. This protected them from each other, as well as from most humans seeking power. But Kiba wasn't taking anything by force, so she wasn't likely to drive him away, right? Deciding to stay one more night in their camp, Kiba starts planning how he'll go about finding the Great Slug. Apparently, the Lady Katsuyu was as large as a mountain, so surely her scent would carry for dozens of miles. Early the next day, Kiba was shocked awake again, but not by a wolf this time. The earth shook beneath him, and by the time he lifted his head, Akamaru had already risen to his feet, surveying the area. Rolling to his knees, Kiba looked around to see several bloodied bodies of wolves strewn everywhere. His shock rapidly transformed into anger as he sought the source of the danger. At the head of the hill, King Cerberus fought with a centipede hundreds of feet in length as it coiled around his body and attempted to lock down his movements. Sprinting towards it, the king roared at Kiba, "Protect my children, boy! Protect my children!" Without hesitation, Kiba spun in place and saw a rhino, just as large as the Cerberus himself, smashing through crowds of wolves. Focusing as much of his chakra as he could, Kiba bit into his thumbs and weaved several hand seals. Multi-contract summoning! Appearing from an explosion of smoke around him were friends he'd made along the way in his journey so far. A great bear with a hide as strong as steel and paws bigger than Kiba's torso appeared beside him. Still on all fours, the bear's back was still 2 feet higher than Kiba's head. A tortoise with a spiked shell large enough for the bear to sit on top of, if the spikes weren't in the way. An eagle great enough to carry Kiba on its back, and a metallic encasing around its beak to add to its offensive potential. A monkey in Konoha garb poised to strike. Despite having just woken up fresh, Kiba nearly dropped from the strain of summoning all of them at once. He shouted instructions to the beasts as the bear and tortoise began their direct assault, and the eagle picked up Kiba and the monkey ran around to flank the rhino. Unlike the animals Kiba summoned, these 2 animals appear to be the kings of their respective tribes, and he wonders what's driven them to this assault and where the lesser members of their clans are. But he doesn't have time to figure out why, as the eagle drops him down onto the rhino. Without any ninja tools at his disposal, Kiba has no choice but to dip further into his chakra pool. "Earth-style, rock-slide jutsu!" Kiba shouts as he descends upon the rhino. Boulders appear all around him as he falls, gaining speed to a terminal velocity before shattering against the back of the rhino. Rearing in response, it deflects Kiba from being able to land on it, but opens itself up to the tortoise getting underneath it. As the bear stands on its hind legs and catches the rhino by its horn, the tortoise beneath begins spinning and its spikes dig into its legs and shred them. Diving from the sky itself, the eagle uses its beak and talons to claw and jab at the rhino's eyes. Leaping from the side, the monkey grabs hold of the rhino's ears and jams them full of dirt to close down at least one of its senses. The rhino never once answers their attacks with a sound of complaint, as it endlessly resists their combined assault. While it struggles to attempt to shake them loose, it suddenly vanishes, and Kiba's summons land onto the ground. A summon? Kiba shouts, rallying his summons to ready up for a ninja as they turn to see a lone man walking towards them. He has long red hair and purple eyes with concentric circles spreading out from the pupils to cover the whole of his eyes. Having never seen something like that before, Kiba shrugs and attacks. While the man walks, he's constantly performing jutsu, to the point that Kiba can't tell where one jutsu ends and another begins. But it's at least visually apparent that the storm of jutsu is aimed at him and his summons, as the earth at their feet turns to mud, and then to oil, before a fireball launches at them. Jumping in its way, the bear attempts to tank the blast, but the resulting damage forces the bear unsummoned. Flying free, the eagle dives at the man from a different angle, shrieking in a pitch that should have deafened the man, but the sound ricochets and turns back on the eagle. The reflected attack is so brutal that the bird loses its flight ability and simply begins to plummet, unsummoning before it hits the ground, a save made by Kiba. Freeing himself from the oil, Kiba looks around for Akamaru for just a second before engaging the man himself, and sees his companion in the corner of his eye charging as well. Lifting a hand to stay Akamaru, Kiba charges instead with his monkey summon. As he gets to the man, he and the monkey from the opposite side engage in straight taijutsu, but the man is clearly extremely practiced at this too, able to fend them both off easily. Smashing the monkey into the ground, the man continues to fend off Kiba as he prepares to stomp down on the monkey. Forced to distance himself and unsummon the monkey, Kiba's flow is disrupted and he's forced now to retreat completely when the man turns his weird eyes solely onto Kiba. Hurtling through the air and spewing water from its leg holes, the tortoise attempts to smash into the red-haired man, but stops in mid-air a few feet from the man. The water jetting out from it vanishes before touching the man, and in another moment, the turtle is blasted away faster than Kiba can see and launched into the sky. Reversing that summon as well, Kiba's left with nothing. Cursing himself for not going all out right away, Kiba smacks his hands together, takes a deep breath, and focuses inward. "Second gate! Gate of healing! Release!" Kiba shouts, with nothing left in his arsenal to use against the man. Glancing up the hill as the second gate fills him, Kiba sees the Cerberus winning out over the centipede. Unlocking the 8 inner gates was one of the qualifiers Kiba needed to sign with the turtles, yet he didn't even use it before summoning them all. Fleeing from the man, Kiba joins the Cerberus' side for a unified front. "Run, boy! This isn't a foe we can beat!" The Cerberus commands him as the centipede also goes up in a puff of smoke. "I'm not leaving until I get my contract," Kiba tells him with determination as he stares at the man approaching. "Who are you?" Kiba shouts to him. "I am Pain," the man answers him as he comes within range. With the simple raising of his hand, he pulls the Cerberus' heads to the ground, possibly with the same force that he used to launch the tortoise. Locking eyes with the great beast is all it takes to imprint his weird purple eye into the canine king. His white fur shifts and turns brown before another word is spoken, and the Cerberus too goes up in a puff of smoke. "You!" Kiba shouts, launching at Pain with renewed vigor, but everything he throws is shut down instantly, ending with him pinned under Pain's foot. "I will dominate all these animal clans. It is my right as Sage of Dominion," Pain tells him, noting the leaf insignia on his headband. "Do you want me to kill you now, or later when I destroy the great nation's cities?" "Later," Kiba wheezes against the pressure of Pain's foot. Smiling at Kiba, Pain lifts his foot off of him and walks away. "I got what I came for." Sorting the injured from the dead and applying what aid he could was all Kiba was able to do, as he helped the healthy restore order. There was nothing any of them could have done to stop the man, but it still tore Kiba up that he did nothing else to stop him. The still able wolves tried to rally together to hunt the man down, but Kiba had to stymie the suggestion. Even as one, none of them stood a chance, and they knew it. they would just be going to their deaths. However, he shares their passion and fiercely promises that no matter what, he'll find a way to liberate their leader from that man. The wolves tell Kiba that Pain is forcing a contract through Dominion, while Kiba's asking for partnerships. Given their new extreme circumstances, they need all the allies they can get. Pulling out a scroll and unfurling it, the wolves invite Kiba to put down his mark so that the next time he meets that man, he can summon all of the wolves to tear him to shreds. He tells them that he'll need to collect all the power he can for such a confrontation, so he'll be heading off to meet with the Feline King next. Now, more than ever, these continued contracts are important to create. The wolves no longer resist the concept of an alliance with such rivals, given the sudden abrupt loss of their king. They even actually recommend that he meets with Katsuyu, as her domain is nearby and she is by far the most powerful summon contract in the world. But they can't even blame Katsuyu for failing to help them because of the surprise attack. Pain was in and out in 10 minutes' time. Despite the amount of offense Kiba mounted against Pain, he actually took very little damage. Of all things, Pain was completely uninterested in Kiba. Bidding the wolves a woeful goodbye, Kiba set out to meet the felines with renewed purpose. Sitting in her office, Tsunade is shaking her head at what she had learned from directly handling both the Byakugan and the Sharingan during the kids' respective surgeries. Despite coming from rival clans, the eyes were oddly similar. Their respective powers were opposite each other as well. While one relied on the physical for an enhanced reaction time and copying a few jutsu for instant replication, the other saw the ethereal at all times, seeing into bodies for chakra natures and knowing what jutsu is coming before the hand seals are even finished. They both serve similar purposes, but their approach was from opposite ends. It was extremely rare that Tsunade got to have a first-hand look at the Kekkei Genkai of such great clans. Hizashi even sat in on the surgery for Hinata because he didn't want Tsunade looking any deeper than what was necessary. And now the young heir had one of each eye. Tsunade was more interested than ever in how that would develop in the girl, if the Sharingan would even awaken for her, and why the eye wasn't immediately active upon transfer, as it was for Kakashi when he was a kid. They were all treading new ground with this, and Tsunade was so intrigued to be at the forefront of the knowledge. Reaching for several scrolls and adding amendments to several while she read about the Tudo Jutsu in as much detail as was available, she hardly noticed Minato blinking into the middle of her office. Snapped from her attention, Tsunade gave a small start as she noticed his white coat against the black of her office. "Focused?" he asked, walking around her desk and picking up the journal he had left for her to keep. Opening it to a presumably blank page, he began writing into it. "Minato?" Tsunade asked, standing and opening the curtains to her room to let a little bit of light in. "Are you okay?" "Tsunade," Minato mutters while he writes everything that's on his mind. "Time is running out." Finishing his entry, he snaps the book shut and tells her that he needs to leave right now, before they become suspicious, and vanishes back to his home. Sighing, he leaves his kitchen and sits down across from Sasuke, who's finally decided to sit down with him. It took many weeks for Sasuke to come to him, despite being unable to see him enough in the past. He knew the toll Sasuke must have been facing from the news of his remaining family, yet he had chosen not to see any kind of reconciliation. Sasuke tells him that he doesn't want to talk about his family, other than Shisui and Akane, his cousin. He assumes Shisui's still out there somewhere, since he heard about Jiraiya's failed mission right after the Chunin exams. That they found the hideout Shisui was meant to be hiding in, but couldn't find a single sign of life inside. Minato should have crushed him when he had the chance, because Shisui was apparently unparalleled when it came to covering his tracks. Minato smiles slightly and tells Sasuke that he may have made it look easy, but Shisui was still extremely formidable. He wasn't sure if he could pull out a win if they fought again. He already laid his cards out on the table. Shisui would adapt the next time. And Akane, well, Sasuke wasn't sure if now was the time to talk about that. Since Minato asked him here, he assumed it was for a different purpose. Nodding, Minato tells him that he was extremely impressed with Sasuke developing an altered version of the Edo Tensei. Sasuke asserts that this was with the help of several sound shinobi, whom the Leaf consider enemies. While using it as a weapon against them is all well and good, Sasuke's point is that they have some extremely intuitive members in their small numbers. Minato notes that very real factor before asking Sasuke if he was willing to share his information about how to perform this remote Edo Tensei. The humanitarian level of not desecrating the graves was very appealing to Minato. Sasuke tells him there are caveats. You can only perform the jutsu on people you're related to, because their chakra in life was more similar to yours. For example, Sasuke can bring back anyone in his family, but he can't bring back Minato's wife. Heck, even Minato can't bring her back. At this point, only Naruto would be able to do that. Additionally, the remote version requires a tie of chakra to the conjurer. If the conjurer dies or loses consciousness, the Edo Tensei dispels itself, since its anchor has vanished. Otherwise, all the other rules remain true. They didn't test it extensively in his time with the Sound Village though, so Sasuke wasn't sure whether they'd be weaker in combat situations. Smiling at the news, Minato tells Sasuke that he's done a great service for the village today. And that's the end of today's episode. I didn't really do a huge cliffhanger this time. I figured too many of those will leave some of you with whiplash. So this was an easier closeout to the episode. One thing you'll notice with this chapter is that it wasn't 100% Kiba. There's simply too many things happening in these 6 days for me to focus all of one episode on just one character, so I'm going to be jumping around like this in the future as well. You'll notice both at the head of this episode and on the thumbnail that this episode occurs chronologically before Neji's episode. Jumbling up the days I thought would be fun for a couple twists here and there, but if anyone finds it too confusing, please let me know and I can just make the adjustment rather easily. All of the Konoha, Triumphant 12 are moving around for these next 6 days, so we'll need to give them all attention. Well, except Lee, he's not moving around too much right now. And yes, I thought them getting a title would be an organic occurrence. It made sense to me that random villagers would gossip their way into creating a nickname for them. And I know Shikamaru was home the whole time, but I like alliteration for one, and also calling them something like the enigmatic 11+1 is a bit of a mouthful, even if enigmatic is a really cool word. We have Minato and Sasuke at the end, as well as that secret meeting that Kiba overhears. Why did Sasuke willfully give Minato information about the Edo Tensei if he was just planning something sinister with his fellow ninja? I wonder what that's all about. Surely that's what Kiba screamed at Neji about too, right? Would anyone believe him if he ranted that Naruto wanted to take out his own dad? Lots of yummy stuff in this episode as well. Nagato marched on the wolves to claim the Cerberus summon, clashing directly with Kiba's quest. Speaking of which, Kiba's been very busy in his time away as well. He's jumping through a lot of hoops to impress all these animal clans, and now we know at least a little bit of what he's aiming for now that he's back. He needs powerful allies if he's going to bring down Nagato, and a lot of information over and above that. Every single line in these last 2 episodes have been designed with purpose, so if you think that there's some random throwaway line that you can afford to forget, think again. I'm trying to learn how to do easy subtitles as well, so you don't have to rely on YouTube messing up spellings for the Japanese names and all that. Hopefully I'm smart and you'll see subtitles right now. If not, then I'm dumb and need another week to figure that out. Unlike with Neji, who got a nice summary of his time away, I spent most of today with Kiba in one place and one time, with brief memories of his previous trials with other clans. I also obviously created additional canon for Katsuyu and how the three great animal clans interact with the lesser animal clans. The idea that the snakes would just eat the other animals makes sense to me, as well as the toads being oblivious as shut-in as they are. But Katsuyu is so gigantic that I assume while she can't hide from others, others can't exactly hide from her. And if Nagato tries to enslave her, she can just suck her eyes back into her body, right? Like the ultimate defense against the Rinnegan. It was another long one today, but I'm not trying to do this. There's just so much to cover. Oh, I almost forgot. I turned on ads to earn a little bit of revenue. I might turn them off again at some point, but I just wanted to see how much was earned in a couple weeks of ads. My channel's growth has not been explosive, so I thought losing out of $4 a week wasn't a big deal. And like I said, it might still be such a small amount that I'm hurting the channel more than helping it by annoying people with ads. But I'll never know how much of a waste of time it is until I turn them on for a little while. I also want to activate channel memberships, but I don't yet have an incentive for people to do that. I have had a couple people offer to do it just out of support, which is awesome, but I also want to have some sort of benefit for those people. Even if that's releasing episodes early for them, that would still require better time management on my part to get the episodes up sooner. Anyway, there's some experimentation in my future, I think. I hope you all enjoyed today's episode, and look forward to next Friday because I feel like I've left it pretty open-ended in terms of who's to come next. The sky's the limit.